Now on Indianapolis This Week.
What I would say instead is Happy Independence Day to the women of the state of Indiana. We get to celebrate our freedom.
The historic week in the debate over abortion. Two huge court rulings in favor of abortion rights. We're joined by the head of Planned Parenthood in Indiana. The other name on the ballot for president. I go one-on-one with Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson. And Mike Pence as the running mate for Donald Trump. Could it really happen?
From RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
And thank you so much for joining us here on this Independence Day weekend. We hope you're getting to spend plenty of quality time with family and friends. The holiday weekend follows a historic week that was in the debate over abortion. It all started on Monday with the U.S. Supreme Court throwing out a Texas law that required clinics to meet the same standards as surgical centers. And then Thursday, RTV6 breaking the news that a federal judge had blocked the state's new abortion restrictions from taking effect. They would have been among the toughest in the country, but federal judge Tanya Walton-Pratt stopped the law, saying it was most likely unconstitutional. Right after that ruling, I sat down with Betty Cockrum, the head of Planned Parenthood in Indiana and Kentucky, to talk about what she called a monumental week for women's rights.
We're celebrating because the last week has just been so extraordinary. First, obviously, with the compelling Supreme Court decision that made it so clear that this kind of legislation just needs to stop occurring in state houses across the country, and most particularly the affirmation that abortion is an incredibly safe procedure. And so that's certainly helpful when you're in these discussions about patient safety at every step of the way. And then when we got Judge Pratt's decision that is so clear and definitive that the pre-viability question is answered, it's done, it's abiding law, and we need not have any further discussion. So here we are celebrating Independence Day, and it truly is a time when women in the state of Indiana can celebrate their freedoms.
Let's go back a few months when this measure moved forward at the State House, when Governor Pence signed it into law. Your initial reaction at that time, did you feel like you would be able to challenge it and win in court?
We actually saw it as the language moves through the legislature. You know, one of the first things we always look at and talk about is the constitutionality question, and that one seemed compelling from the very get-go. And then, of course, just even as a taxpayer, I wish that the constitutionality question would cause it to go away. It doesn't cause it to go away. There's reason to believe that occurs because there's a political base that they need to play to. They have reason to believe that Planned Parenthood will come along, file a lawsuit. ACLU of Indiana will represent us. We'll win. And then they've done their job, and the constitutionality stands. During
Thursday's press conference to celebrate that being handed down, you had referenced the fact that there was a lot of support for you outside of the courtroom.
The support of the group means a lot because these jobs are tough. Being with Planned Parenthood, particularly in a state like Indiana, is tough. And so for our staff across the state to have that kind of support for the stakeholders, the donors, the activists, the people who really get engaged to ensure that there's a voice for women and reproductive justice in this state, for 52,000 hits to occur on periods for Pence, and for there to be national media coverage of that, for 3,000 people to come and rally at the State House, it's meaningful, and it's a great boost, and it speaks to the majority of persons believing that it's important for women to have a right to safe, legal abortion.
Had Judge Pratt not issued that preliminary injunction, what would have happened on Friday?
Things would have had to change, and certainly it would have changed a great deal for doctors, and made it difficult for them to practice with the freedom that they should have and have enjoyed from the time that they became practitioners. But there was also the whole issue with cremation or interment of fetal remains, and that was introducing a whole uncertainty. We talked to countless funeral home operators, and there was concern about, if you get into this, can you comply? Will you meet meet the requirements, will you introduce controversy into your life? I looked at it as a page after page of law of unintended consequences. The author didn't really know what that language might do, and fortunately now we don't have to find out.
Jason, thank you so much. Joining us now is Mike Victor with Indiana Right to Life. Mike, what's your reaction to the court's ruling earlier this week?
Well, we're very disappointed with the ruling. We think this is a great civil rights injustice for unborn babies in Indiana. And to explain that, I think it's very important to understand that as a result of this judge's ruling, a baby in Indiana can be aborted for no other reason than the fact that perhaps she's African American, or she's of Hispanic origin, or possibly she has Down syndrome, or even the fact that she's a girl. Those are all fair game issues to abort a baby as a result of this ruling. But there's a second part of this as well. The judge also blocked a final dignified disposal for babies who have already been aborted in Indiana. What that means is that she bought the ACLU and Planned Parenthood's argument that an aborted baby in Indiana is of no more value, is not to be differentiated from common medical garbage that's thrown out at hospitals every single day. So as a result of this, aborted babies in Indiana will be lumped in with medical waste. They will be thrown into grinders. They'll be dumped into landfills. And if the denial of civil rights and the denial of final dignity, if those two things don't signify a major civil rights injustice, then I don't know what does. We're very disturbed by the ruling, heartbroken by the ruling, actually.
Does this ruling in any way reflect a change in attitudes against pro-life?
I don't think so. Indiana's a very pro-life state. We have 6 different events throughout the state of Indiana every year that draws anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 people per event. It's a very strong pro-life state. What I do think that it signifies is a move into high gear of a judicial activism now that we saw at the Supreme Court level earlier this week, and now we've seen it through this U.S. District Court judge, where these judges are putting a political philosophy that abortion, unrestricted, full 9 months of pregnancy, no holds barred, is the paramount right that they think they now have to protect, and then everything else falls into that and falls to the wayside. So I think what we're seeing is a more disturbing trend in judicial activism, but I don't think this reflects at all on the true nature of the pro-life strength in the state of Indiana.
You went after this judge because she was appointed by President Obama, but even on the U.S. Supreme Court, you saw in the Texas case that even those justices appointed by Republicans also had a hard time with the abortion issue as it related to the Texas case. So where does this battle then stand?
Well, I think an important note on that is that a Republican appointee to the court who goes rogue, if you will, is an anomaly. And certainly we've seen those on the Supreme Court, Justice Kennedy being the blaring example right now with that. But we can't forget that the 3 conservative votes on the court, and it would have been 4 this week had Scalia still been on the court, there would have been 4 conservative votes on the court. All of those are Republican nominees. But on the flip side of that coin, when you see a Democratic nominee, I would challenge anyone to put forward a nominee that's been placed on the Supreme Court or in the district court system that's been nominated by President Clinton or President Obama, who went onto the court and then suddenly went rogue and became conservative. We never see that. Democratic nominees to the court stay hardcore left. Republican nominees are more than likely going to be conservative. One of the issues with that, though, is the judicial nomination process now is so gummed up with politics that for a Republican to successfully navigate a judge through the nominating process, they have to put forward a judge that has almost 0 rulings on social issues. And so that creates an issue because now you are forced into a situation of putting forth judges like Justice Kennedy, where Republicans hope they're conservative, but we don't know. But when it comes to a Sotomayor, a Ginsburg, or Kagan, we knew exactly the political philosophy that those candidates had when Democratic presidents put them forward.
Well, you have 2 choices coming up in November, either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Whom do you have more confidence in picking a justice that you believe will carry out the mission of the Indiana Right to Life vision of the world?
Well, without a doubt, that would be Mr. Trump. We know exactly where Hillary Clinton is going to go with a judicial nominee, and she'll make no bones about it. She's made no bones about it. Support for unrestricted, full 9 months of pregnancy abortion is going to be a litmus test for the Clinton administration of putting any judge into the system. So we know exactly what we're going to get with a Hillary Clinton, should she have the opportunity to stack the court. In fact, I would just say it's no great mystery that should we see a Clinton administration, the Supreme Court will be lost to conservative causes for at least a generation. So the only hope that we see in getting a conservative, a strict constitutional judge onto the U.S. Supreme Court would be a Donald Trump administration.
10 seconds left. Are you hoping that the state will appeal this federal court ruling?
Absolutely, and we have full confidence that the state will do that.
Mike Victor with Indiana Right to Life, thank you so much. Please join us anytime.
Our thanks to you both. And speaking of Hillary or Trump, if you don't like either of them as your choice for president, he'd like you to consider him for the job. I'll go one-on-one with Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson next. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. And welcome back to Indianapolis This Week as we turn once again to the race for president. So many polls up to this point have shown us just how many people dislike both major party candidates. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, both with extremely high unfavorable ratings. That's where Libertarian candidate and former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson says he comes in. He's pitching himself as a real alternative to both. He was here in Indianapolis this week for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Governor, thanks so much for joining
Jason,
us.
Thanks for letting me do this.
Good to see you. T-minus about 4 months left in the election.
Yeah.
Where does it go from here for you?
Well, hopefully being in the presidential debate. So hopefully being included in the polls that determines who's in the presidential debates. And right now, being at a consensus number of around 10% in the polls, there's a lot of scrutiny that's happening with myself and Bill Weld running for president, and that's a good thing. I think we've got records, resumes that really hold up under this scrutiny.
You and Governor Weld, also a former Republican, both former Republicans. Talk about the state of the Republican Party now as you look at it from an outsider point of view.
Well, I've said that if Donald Trump is a nominee, that he fully alienates more than half of Republicans. I think more than half of Republicans are there because they believe in smaller government. And whether they're socially conservative or whether they're socially liberal, they really don't care. It is about smaller government. And with regard to Donald Trump, I think he's all over the board. And with regard to deporting 11 million undocumented workers, building a fence across the border, that they are murderers and rapists when in fact statistically they're very law-abiding, more so than U.S. citizens. I think it's incendiary myself.
When you look at this election cycle so far, you look at a Donald Trump, you look at a Bernie Sanders, people with more of that outsider mentality have fared relatively well so far. Now when it's down to Trump and Clinton, you really become the outsider in this. How do you make that case to those undecided voters out there?
Well, that I really represent, and Bill Weld represent the broad middle here, being fiscally conservative, socially liberal, conservative. It doesn't matter as long as you let people make choices in their own lives. Always come down on the side of choice by individuals as long as those choices don't adversely affect others. Free markets, that's how you bring peace to the world, is free markets. Stop with these military interventions. We're not isolationists, but we're non-interventionists. We don't want to get involved in other people's affairs, other countries' affairs. If we're attacked, we're going to attack back. But right now, the fact that we put boots on the ground, that we drop bombs, that we fly drones and kill thousands of innocent people have made the world less safe, not more safe.
A big topic, of course, over the last few years, especially the past several weeks in the wake of the Orlando massacre, has been about gun control. Your plan to reduce the amount of gun violence in the United States?
Well, I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. But that said, should we have an open debate and discussion over how you keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill? Yes. Should we have an open debate and discussion over how do you keep guns out of the hands of would-be terrorists? Yes, we should. I would be really curious to know what transpired between the FBI and the shooter in Orlando. 3 times they interviewed him. I think they've probably got some pretty darn good ideas on how we move forward from here.
For traditional voters that are used to voting Republican or Democrat, that thought of voting for a third party could potentially scare them. How different is a Libertarian candidacy and the potential of a Libertarian president different from what we have seen in the past?
Well, how about viewing it as the best of both worlds, being fiscally conservative and socially you make choices in your life? And really, does anyone think the world is safer today as a result of what we're doing? You know, our human life, meaning men and servicewomen that are dying, getting hurt for the rest of their lives. I would love to be President of the United States, make the world safer, and not have any blood spilled by U.S. men and servicewomen.
Final question for you, the shoes.
I'm running for President of the United States, so, you know, got some kicks here that I hope represent that.
Governor Johnson, thanks so much for your time.
So, Jason, how many guys do you know that have climbed the highest mountain on each of the 7 continents?
I know one now.
Yes.
Governor Johnson.
Anyway,
good
thank
to see
you.
you.
Thank you.
Picking a running mate for Donald Trump. Is Governor Pence really on the list? And is it something that could actually happen? Our insiders are ready to dive into that debate next, right here on Indianapolis This Week, only on RTV6. And welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. We want to welcome in our political insiders now. Mary Beth Schneider, of course, Laura Beck, Abdul Hakim Shabazz. Thank you so much for being here on a holiday weekend. Happy early 4th of July.
Thank you.
And we're all fired up about fireworks. And let's talk about the big political firework, of course. Governor Mike Pence under consideration officially as a potential vice president and running mate to Donald Trump. The two meeting this weekend to talk about the campaign. Of course, the two also met back in April before Indiana's primary, when Pence would go on to give a lukewarm endorsement of Ted Cruz, but still give a lot of praise to Donald Trump in the process. So let's have some fun with this.
Okay, I'll be the first one.
Is this one of your games where we have to pretend
this is
like
not a game.
Are we in an alternate universe?
This is real
here?
life here on Indianapolis This Week. Abdul,
Not a
let's start
test.
with you. What would Pence being a running mate do for Donald Trump? Let's start there.
It does give Donald Trump a couple of things. Number one, you have a governor that is from a state that's doing well economically. Also, please remember, Donald Trump did win Indiana, 53% of the vote. Hillary Clinton did not. Also, what Mike Pence does, he brings you that Ted Cruz wing of the Republican Party, the more social conservatives that aren't quite sure about Mr. Trump and how serious he is on those issues. Now, do I think Mike's going to get it? Probably not, but that is what he brings to the table.
Can I jump in here? That tells
Go for it. It's a holiday weekend. Whatever you want, Mary
I'm
Beth.
just going to sit here and
I agree
smile.
with everything Abdul said, and it is frankly friggin' amazing that a Republican nominee for president in July needs to lock down
The social conservatives.
the social conservatives. That's
Yeah.
right. This is not what he certainly, there's no other reason to put Mike Pence on here. He should never have to be trying to win Indiana. He should have Indiana. If you don't have Indiana, you are not, you're John McCain and you aren't going to win the presidency if you're a Republican. And the social conservatives should be the given. That's the base. And for at this point, for Donald Trump to either be seriously considering Mike Pence or want those people to know that he took a look at a member that they feel really confident in really tells you more about Donald Trump than Mike Pence.
Laura, let's flip the coin. What does this do for Mike Pence?
Well, I think, though, I think for Mike Pence, it puts his name out into the national circles, which is where he's always wanted to be anyway. I don't think he ran for governor because he wanted to be governor of Indiana. I think he ran for governor to use it as a launch pad to be president. And so now that presents a problem for him in Indiana, because if he is not picked for vice president, it's, oh, hey, he's been saying all along, I don't want to be president. I don't want to be vice president. I'm not. But then you find out that he's doing it. So the optics of it are not good when you look at it from the perspective of what people in Indiana are seeing.
And Indiana Democrats pounced on it on Friday to that very
Well,
end.
as they should. I mean, that's what they're supposed to pounce on it. I mean, they should be singing it from the rooftops. But
Well, I want to talk
again,
about...
but here, let me say this,
let's
though.
finish.
I worked for Governor Kernan, and I worked for Mrs. Kernan, and I still think that it was hard for them to overcome the fact that he had said, I don't want to run for governor, and then he actually turned around after Governor Bannon died and said, I do want to run for governor. that makes it a challenge for
Quick
Pence.
question. Does the simple speculation, the fact that this can go on now for a few days, does this hurt Pence's gubernatorial chances come November?
I don't think so. I really don't. I think the gubernatorial race will be what it is. Actually, if I were Democrats, I'd be more worried about John Gregg getting $250,000 worth of free health insurance for the past 14 years and whether Mike Pence will be Donald Trump's running mate.
We were waiting for you to drop that in at some point in the 5.5.
I think the bigger issue going forward would be, let's say Pence did take it. If he got it and he took it, what does this do to his political career?
Yeah.
You are going to be forever linked with the guy known for xenophobia, racism, misogyny, being a bully. And so
but
then
Pence is known for some of those things in Indiana himself,
Well, no,
except for being a
I think
bully.
that's-
I mean,
well,
he's not a bully, but he's known for, you know, keeping
think
Syrian
it's probably kind
refugees
of harsh,
out.
but yes.
Yeah, but I mean, there are people in Indiana who are not comfortable with him.
But if they won, I guess, you know, more power to him, I suppose. But if they lost, what kind of career would he have? And the odds are right now that they would lose. And it's amazing to me that he's considering it.
Abdul, what's the timeline for Indiana Republicans?
From what I understand is usually at this point in the game, you got about, if you can drop off the ballot now, you got about 30 days to replace him. If he resigns, he's got to do it about the middle of the month, because then state party has to pick somebody, and then you get to a point where
the state committee has to pick someone,
yeah, because you can't leave after a certain date. You cannot leave the ballot unless you move the state or die. And if Pence does run for VP, that puts Eric Holcomb, I would argue, as the front runner. And if you're John Gregg, you planned your whole plan was to run against Mike Pence, not against Eric Holcomb.
As we love to say in TV, stay tuned. Follow us on Twitter right now at Indy This Week. We'll be right back. And thank you so much for joining us here for Indianapolis This Week. We hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend and a fantastic 4th of July, everyone. For Raphael, Katie, and our entire team, have a great rest of your Sunday.